Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hammer Territory podcast. This is episode 260. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you only a few hours after our last episode. And this time, I am joined, I joked yesterday, I'm joined very rarely by Stephen Tolbert, even more rarely by Shawn Coleman. But Shawn Coleman is here for a true, I don't know about you, Shawn, a stunning emergency podcast on Labor Day afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Listen, we have been missing these emergency podcasts. We thought that we were going to at least get a couple of them at the trade deadline. That wound up not working so much, but I'm going to give the Braves credit. We're going to get into it quite a bit. But one of the things that stands out to me was that the lack of activity at the trade deadline, not trading Rysell, not trading Marcell, those things came, a little bit confused as to why those things did not occur. But at the very least, in the aspect of how are they going to improve for 2026, one thing that I will greatly admit I did not think that much of, the waiver wire. Having a good spot in that waiver wire, the Braves have worked that out. We're going to discuss that, obviously, with their latest move, but a pretty exciting emergency podcast, if you ask me.
Yeah, to be sure. And if you are new to the podcast, we are Hammer Territory. We cover the Braves all year round. Go ahead and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. But it's a true blue emergency podcast because the Braves claimed Ha-Seong Kim off of waivers on Monday from the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, that may not sound exciting, but Shawn, I know between the four of us, we talked about Ha-Seong Kim probably 25 times this winter as a potential free agent target. A lot of people immediately on Twitter were like, wait, is this the same guy that we talked about in free agency this winter? And the answer was yes to that question. But this is one of those mystery waiver things where no one even knew he was on waivers. The Rays didn't announce he was on waivers. It was one of those situations where like he has some money left in his contract. We'll talk about it. But it's a contractual situation where the Braves are taking on some risk, but they're adding in a player that we talked about. Look, I just refreshed my memory before we started recording. A lot of projections had Ha-Seong Kim maybe signing a deal in like the $16 to $20 million annual value range this last winter. Fangraphs had him at 5 for 100 projection at one point this last winter, and there was some injury concerns and all that. But he's just suddenly available on September 1st at a position where the Braves famously have had a hole for several seasons now. It's interesting. It's comes with some risk. He's had injury questions that we'll talk about, but this is a potential, and I want to use potential on purpose, potential solution to shortstop. And also, as you just alluded to, a real commitment of resources to where there's no guarantee because there's a player option, not club option, a player option in play here. That there's no guarantee that he'll be on the roster. But if you're the Braves, you can't make this move unless you are prepared to have him on the roster at a big time sum of money next season. So it's truly like a October, November, December level emergency podcast on September 1st.
Absolutely. And it's, potentially even bigger, and that's the thing that stands out about this. We'll break down a few different aspects of it, but let's first get to the player. The player, yep. Kim himself. We're talking about a player who averaged higher than 3 FWAR from 2022, 2024. And I know myself, I know you, Brad, I know all four of us, I know many in Braves country have talked about it. We don't need someone who's going to sit here and put up a 900 OPS at shortstop. Sure, that would be great, but we're probably not going to pay the money to get that type of player. We just need league average production offensively. And that would make a ton of difference for this team. And that's what you're potentially getting with Ha-Seong Kim. You see that he had over 100 WRC plus in 22, 23, and 24. But the kicker is that it comes with Gold Glove level defense, consistent Gold Glove level defense. And you didn't have to give up any type of prospect capital. Yes, you're taking on potentially a $16 million commitment. Obviously, has only played 24 games over the past year plus. There's a bit of injury concern there, but the upside, in my opinion, makes it worth it. I don't know if there's a better potential player who could sum up all the things we've been asking for at shortstop than Kim, and that's what gets me excited. Risk involved, but I think the reward potentially is certainly worth it.
Yeah, and to your point, this is why we talked about him a lot this winter, and the injury was always the caveat. He was not healthy, and that's why he got the deal that he got, which was a 2-year deal with a player option. He kind of took that like kind of a pillow-ish contract because it was like, all right, get healthy, go back on the market potentially if you want to. But it was always him and Willy Adames that were the names that we talked about at shortstop, and they were kind of polar opposites. You mentioned Gold Glove defense. He actually did win the Gold Glove at shortstop in 2023. Like it's a proven thing. Whether he is as good as Nick Allen defensively. Maybe not. Nick Allen's been incredible, but like he's a very good defensive player and a much, much better hitter for a long time than what the Braves have had in position since Arcia had that season a couple of years ago where he kind of had, was above his head for half a season. So Kim is 29. He'll turn 30 in October. You just gave some of these, but I'll say the numbers as well. He averaged 3.5 wins above replacement for 3 years in a row. Reached as high as, five win season in 2023. A 106 WRC plus over 3 years combined. That's above average hitter at shortstop with plus glove. Costs a lot of money and it's worth a lot of money. That's what he is. It's not a elite bat by any means, but it's an above average hitter. Also takes walks, 11% walk rate over those 3 seasons. Doesn't strike out a ton. Averaged 13 homers a season, so not a ton of power, but a little like non-zero power. And just a very well-rounded hitter, great defensive metrics. And until the last year, we'll come back to this, I'm sure. The durability aspect is probably the biggest thing here. Until the last issue with the shoulder and now the back, he did average 141 games a season in those 3 years. So it wasn't like he was always hurt. Like this is a guy who played as a full-time starter for 3 full seasons in San Diego and was a plus player. So that's kind of what he actually is. I mean, do you want to talk about the injury? Do you want to bury the lead on that? We probably have to talk about the injury at some point and where we are at this stage because it really matters. And then we'll get to the contract too.
Yeah, I mean, the injury concern is a bit. It's certainly relevant in my opinion. And the thing is that I believe also it's been multiple injuries as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I want to say it was a wrist at the end of last year. I may have been wrong. I may be wrong on the injury itself.
I've got it too. I got the history. So yeah, don't worry.
But what I'm getting at is that it's not as if it's just some random injury that has occurred that has kept him out for much of the season. Last year, he had a different injury than he has now, which kept his contract expectations low. That's why he had to take the structure of the deal that he got. This year, he certainly has not been a pillar of health. So that injury risk certainly stands out. Now, if he's coming back and the Braves potentially get to see him for a month or so, Brad, you, I, many others have talked about it. One of the biggest goals for this Braves team is to have as many other impact players going into the offseason as healthy as possible. Kim could be that type of player for this Braves squad. And if he can go into the offseason healthy, that's a big difference. But yes, it's relevant. It's something that, when it comes to injury, again, with it being multiple injuries, that heightens the concern that they could pop up again. So the injury part of this, that's where the risk is. It's certainly relevant. It's not just something to set to the side.
And it's probably the biggest reason why he was available. So we'll get into that in a second. We'll get to the contract, which is very, very important to navigate those waters, what the Braves are looking at shortstop over the next month. All that's coming up in a second after a word from our partners. NFL fans, Week 1 is your shot to play free and stack $1 million cash bag with DraftKings Pick 6, an official partner of the NFL. Here's how. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, DraftKings' easiest way to play fantasy. Enter for free and pick more or less on 6 player stats for Week 1. Share your link with friends to add more cash to the bag and get bonus shots to win. Hit all 6 picks. You'll be splitting a bag that's already at $1 million or more. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, use code FOUL, opt in for free, and start stacking entries for NFL Week 1. Zero cost, huge upside in partnership with DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. Must claim token for free entry in Bag Builder contest. Only perfect entries earn share of cash prize. Tokens are single use and expire September 8th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right, Shawn. So our colleague, Ken Rosenthal, was first to report the news, and the Braves have since announced it, so it's official. When that came down, I think we all had this flood of questions and all these things, right? And one of the things that you already alluded to was the injury history. So when we talked about him, I went through kind of some podcast notes from the winter to refresh my memory of what we were saying. And it was he had a labrum tear. Like he had a labrum tear. That was well known. He had to have surgery. When the whole time we talked about it, it was like, we know he's not going to be ready for April. That was the looming specter about Ha-Seong Kim as a potential add in free agency. It was like, all right, when is he actually going to play? And this season was, well, it's lost now, was supposed to be one where the Braves were competing and that every game was going to matter and all of that stuff mattered. And maybe that was why they didn't get on him. We don't know. But he didn't come back until basically early July. So he missed, a long time. That was expected, though, with the shoulder. When he came back, he played 24 games in about a 6-week period. So there was a little bit of an injury to his back in the middle of that. He had some back issues. He went on the IL for 10 days. He came off the IL, played a little bit more, and then currently was on the IL when he was placed on waivers. That's not supposed to be a long-term issue. I know Ken already reported this. The Braves, as we're recording this Monday afternoon, have not talked about this. They announced it, but unless I'm missing something, Snit hasn't talked. Nobody's talked yet as we're talking. Keep that in mind as a timestamp here. But Ken's framing was like he's basically ready to go off the IL. So presumably he'll be ready to play. I mean, maybe not today, but maybe ready to play in the next couple of days. And that's the injury history. That's going to matter even more when we talk about the contract. But as far as like, it's not a tryout because they have a commitment beyond the season with player option. But I'm assuming, I mean, I don't know about you, Sean. I am assuming, I don't like to assume, but we have to right now, that he's going to play shortstop every day. I mean, I can't imagine you make this move and then he doesn't play every day as soon as he's able to play.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the Braves have every reason to play him at shortstop, right? Because they want that he's now on the team. And I know that may seem very obvious, but the point that I'm getting at is that it doesn't make any sense for the Braves to sit here and make this move just to set him to the side and let him go into the offseason and then try to prevent anything else from happening to him. You want him to play because you want to be able to see when we get into the contract, we already know that there's a good chance he potentially could be on a player option. But we also know the Braves like to be very creative when it comes to these player options or when it comes to these contracts. If he plays well, they like what they see. Could that mean more? And the other thing about the injury that I think, again, is makes it even more relevant than just Kim's, having multiple, significant injuries over the past year plus. That's the big story for the Braves over the past year plus. So many of our players that have been an all-star level, kind of like Kim has been in the past, but injuries have crept up all of a sudden and now are a part of their player profile. Austin Riley being one of them. So, we hear all these great things about Kim. We hear what he has been, but if you're a bit concerned, could he get back to that since we've seen it happen to other Braves? I don't blame you a bit. And that certainly is part of his profile. So that is where when the injuries come to play, I think that's why the Braves have another reason to play him. Get him to end the season on a good note, have him be healthy, have him be productive. Here in a minute, we'll discuss another aspect of his game that's really, really important to the Braves if they do decide to keep him 2026 and beyond. But getting him on the field playing and being productive, I think is a big plus if it can happen.
Yeah, and again, Ken said it, Ken reported it. We'll see what the Braves say, and we'll cover that on our next episode. But that's the assumption that I'm going to make. I think you're making the same one. And look, he's replacing Nick Allen. There's been a lot of Nick Allen discourse. We don't have to do all that today. Nick Allen has done what Nick Allen should have been expected to do this season. It's not his fault that he can't hit. He's never been able to hit. And he's played great defense. And honestly, I had this stat that I'm almost like sheepish to share it because it's not like I feel like I'm picking on Nick Allen and I'm not. It's Nick Allen has been fine. Nick Allen is not the problem with the 2025 Braves. I don't know if you agree with me on that, Sean, but that's what I feel about Nick Allen. I'm saying that now just to say this stat. Nick Allen currently has the lowest slugging percentage by an MLB player in at least 400 plate appearances since 1988. Nick Allen has a 249 slugging percentage this season. In the last 30 years, the lowest until now was 261. So he's 12 points below the worst mark in the last 30 years of basically a full-time player. So again, not his fault. Nick Allen was always supposed to be a backup utility infielder. And then Arcia fell off the face of the earth and all those things. So I get it. Honestly, kudos to Nick Allen. I'm not picking on Nick Allen at all. Nick Allen did his job. But it's not like the Rays have to make this huge, changing of the guard at shortstop. You just shake Nick Allen's hand and say, Nick, you are now our backup infielder again. And Ha-Seong Kim steps in.
Absolutely. And I think that it needs to be said, Nick Allen, though he's shown his defensive value, Nick Allen has more value to a winner than he does to a team that's struggling. And the reason why it is because he is the type of player, his main value is in run prevention. You want that late in games. And if the Braves could utilize him and Kim, because don't forget, Kim can play third, Kim can play second. You put those two guys out there during some late game situations to prevent leads, that will be an excellent benefit for this Braves squad if they retain Allen. The big key for the Braves and why they're so interested and why they got Kim, they need to score runs fronts earlier in games. And that's why we've talked about upgrading at shortstop was something that they had to address. Scott Coleman, your partner, has talked about it ad nauseum, and he has every right to. They've got to be able to get more offensive production out of the spot. So Nick Allen, I agree with you. I think the Braves have every right to want to retain him next year for his defensive value, but they could not go into next year looking to contend getting that low of production, especially over the past 2 years. And here's a big key, Brad, as to why I'm so excited about Kim. Above 100 plus, or above 100 WRC plus with runners in scoring position since the start of 2003. The Braves over the past 2 years have had the lowest production at shortstop with runners in scoring position. That in of itself is where the value lies.
And I don't know if this is what you were referring to earlier when you teased a skill set. Was it the ability to run? Because Ha-Seong Kim can run. Was that where you were going with that, Sean?
Oh, it was the ability to run, but also the ability to hit with runners in scoring position. Yes.
Yeah, I figured it was one of the two, and probably both. But Kim, something we didn't say earlier, just to say it out loud, he has a season where he stole 38 bases, and they stole 22 the year after that. And stolen bases can be overvalued to some degree, but like when you steal 60 bases in 2 years, hitting in the middle of the order, not even leading off, like he was hitting like sixth most of the time for the Padres. That's a potential weapon, provided he's still got the speed that he had coming off of the injuries. But it's a shoulder. Like it's not like he shouldn't have lost a ton of speed. He's also not in the middle of his prime, but the fact that he'll be 30 next year, that's still pretty much a normal prime age. Skill set wise, he's not the fastest player in the world, but he does have a skill set for stealing bases. I think he had like a 76th percentile sprint speed in his most recent full season. So a guy who can run, give them a little bit more juice. They haven't had a ton of that recently. Where he'll hit in the order, I have no idea. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, when he gets established. But a guy who can get on base again, 11% walk rate for 3 years, not a zero there, and someone who, is a professional hitter. Like that gets overused, but not going to blow you away. He's not going to hit 50 home runs. He averaged 13 home runs a season. Like that's what you're talking about. But he's not going to also be a guy they have to bat ninth every day if he's right. So that's nice.
Yeah, it's nice to have a high floor player in many different areas. He can run in a productive fashion. He can hit he has situational hitting in a productive fashion. He can field in a productive fashion. Look at last year when we got Ramon Laureano and not Mark Grizzle, excuse me, Whit Merrifield. Mark Grizzle, he reminds me of Mark Grizzle.
I was like, wow, that was quite a throwback, Sean. I appreciate that.
Deep cut, as they say. But when we got Whit Merrifield last year, just the overall batting approach. Smart hitter, worked counts, could field okay. Kim can field even better, but also it was just productive when he was on the field. That is Ha-Seong Kim, and the Braves need as many of that as possible. We've seen the impact that Jurickson Profar has made while the Braves signed him just at being at the plate. It's productive at bat after productive at bat. That's what you're getting with Kim, and I think that high floor in many of the areas where we've had such a low floor here recently, especially from the shortstop position, is why it's really exciting to see what he can do if he stays on the field.
Yeah, and I know since we hear from fans all the time, and it's great. We love hearing from people, and I know a lot of fans don't like necessarily the fact that the Braves have a lot of not all or nothing, but a lot of guys who are relying on hitting the ball hard, and they don't have the best approaches all the time. Kim is the opposite of that. He doesn't hit the ball very hard. A lot of blue in his like hard hit metrics on his StatCast page, but I just pulled this up to make sure I wasn't crazy. Last season, 2024, 98th percentile chase rate. He doesn't swing at bad pitches. That's a nice breath of fresh air for Braves fans. 92nd percentile whiff rate. He doesn't miss pitches. When he swings, he tends to hit the ball. And he takes walks, doesn't strike out. All those things that I think people maybe yearn for on this roster a little bit more. And look, Profar's added some of that too. Profar's approach has been a breath of fresh air with his walks and not striking out a ton. Another guy like that who kind of fills this roster out, because look, they're still going to be relying on guys like Olsen, guys like Riley. Harris is going to be on this team. Harris is a chase guy. We all understand that. But having another guy who's not that to balance things out a little bit is pretty helpful. And not, I think that's going to be, again, breath of fresh air is probably being overused by me on this conversation, but just a solid professional hitter.
And that's the type of presence that you want for someone that likely is going to be batting towards the bottom of your order. Because I know that we referenced the wonderful years, the wonderful past that was 2023. I know that a lot of homers were hit, but two forgotten aspects, I think, of what made that offense so good: their ability to score runs early and their ability to turn that line over in such a productive way, getting the 8 and 9 guys set up for Acuna and others at the top of the order. You put Kim down there compared to the other guys that we ran out at shortstop over the past couple of years, that turns that lineup over. That puts those productive at bats in that second and third inning in place to where we can get that extra run or two to support our pitchers and play with the lead more often. That's where a big value from Kim comes from. And the more hitters that we can get like that, especially when it comes to us not having to give up anything to get him, Jake Fraley is that type of potential outcome as well. That's adding these two guys gives us those high floor depth pieces where when guys are potentially out with injuries or guys are struggling next year, we've now got much better options than we've had the past couple of years. That's what makes these moves so exciting, in my opinion.
Certainly, and it doesn't fix anything from this year. We're not saying it does, but Alex has certainly not gone to sleep recently. Like, he's been very active. The pitching stuff's gotten a lot of funny attention from us and others about kind of the cycle of, name your least favorite pitcher: Eric Fetty, Cal Quantrill, Carlos Carrasco, etc. But Jake Fraley is an interesting addition, potentially for the future. This is even a high-profile example of that. And with that as the backdrop, we will get into the contract and the implications there after a word from our partners.
We're throwing a curveball at you this week for our Arena Club segment, as AJ has opened up a Pokemon slap pack.
Is that how you say it?
Pokemon slap pack. Pokemon. Don't ask me to say what that card is, but what are you doing with that card?
I already sold it. Are you kidding me?
Back, baby.
I bought it, and then I got more money than I paid for the pack, so I sold it straight back.
You bought it for
$250.
You sold it for
$299.
And you can go get yourself something that you maybe know how to pronounce.
Yes, or know what it is. I just did it because I saw certain people opening Pokemon, and they were making money, and guess what? I got lucky. Made money off of it too.
Exactly. But of course, if you're into sports cards, that is something that you can find a ton of on the Arena Club marketplace. Buy, sell, slab pack, trade. 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase can be had at arenaclub.com/foul and use the code FOUL. That's arenaclub.com/foul and use code FOUL.
All right, Shawn, the big part of this beyond the field, because the on-field stuff matters a lot, but it's the contract is the headliner here. Honestly, we've kind of buried the lead to some degree. Ha-Seong Kim has a $16 million player option for 2026. One more time, $16 million player option for 2026. I've already seen people, I'm sure you have too, misinterpreting this. People talking about this is a tryout. No. This is not a club option. This is Ha-Seong Kim being able to unilaterally pick up a $16 million player option if he wants to pick it up. That means the Braves have to do this. It may not stay this way. There is a pathway that you mentioned earlier very smartly that they could potentially renegotiate, maybe end up with a multi-year deal that's a little bit lower. There's ways you can do this. But if nothing else changes, you could be owing Ha-Seong Kim $16 million for next season. And on one hand, that's encouraging that the Braves and somebody even above Alex was willing to greenlight that. But also, that's a real commitment for a guy who's been banged up for the last year. And he is worth that if he's healthy. He's been worth more than that, honestly, the last 3 years before this year. But that's a real big commitment, Shawn. And also, Alex has this stated, I don't know if it's a full-fledged club policy, but a preference, at least a strong preference, to not give out player options. He has a player option. So, that's just really, all this is very interesting. It wasn't a trade, so it wasn't like you had to go out and talk to the Padres about this. The Rays about this. But it's a lot of weirdness. This is not a very Bravesy thing that's happening here. The player option, the big commitment a year ahead of time for a guy that they could have signed this winter, they didn't sign. What do you make of all this?
Well, I tip my hat to Alex Anthopoulos for going out of his comfort zone, going into doing another creative type of move with where we were in the waiver wire to add a potential difference-making talent when we want to contend. Now, I know that $16 million is quite a bit to take on, or quite a bit to commit with the recent injury history that we've seen from Ha-Seong Kim, but this also falls in line with kind of what Alex Anthopoulos has done in his Braves tenure. He signed Josh Donaldson in 2019 when Donaldson came off an off year, and Donaldson was absolutely outstanding for us. He signed Marcell Ozuna before the 2020 season when he was coming off a bit of an off year. He's been absolutely outstanding for us. So this kind of, the way that he's going about doing it through the waiver wire is a bit odd or a bit different from what we've seen, but it winds up in the same spot in terms of you've got a 1-year deal with someone who in Kim, I feel like is going to have more focus on keeping healthy, being productive, because on Kim's side of things, which is what I think makes it more than makes sense for the Braves to do, even though Kim's turning 30, even though he's had injury concerns over the past 2 years, I think if he opts into that player option or he does some type of 1-year renegotiation with the Braves, I think Kim has every reason to want to play healthy and play productive next year, because then he goes back into the free agent market at the end of 2026 at 31 years old. He still could get a very lucrative contract as a proven shortstop. So he has every reason to play well next year. I think the Braves are betting on that. And if they want to keep him long-term, that potentially makes sense, but they really could benefit from him wanting to do want to make good year. That's the other aspect of this that I really think helps the Braves want to invest in Kim's production.
Yeah, there's so much nuance in that. What I would recommend strongly is that people not overreact to what the next 4 weeks of results bring with Ha-Seong Kim. On one hand, because I get it. On one hand, I've seen a lot of like, oh, well, they got a month to see what they have. Yes, they do, but it's 4 weeks of games, and even that to be plays today, which we don't know how fast it's going to play. It might be 3 weeks of game. It might be 3.5 weeks. We don't know. That's not a big enough sample size to learn enough to only make a unilateral decision based on that. Alex, and you mentioned it already, Alex has a history of looking beyond the most recent season, also a history of looking beyond the box score numbers. He likes this is an organization that does value batted ball profile, that does value the things that don't necessarily make their way into your Baseball Reference first cover page. They like to see the whole picture. And with Kim, you're doing that no matter what. If he comes out and hits 400 the next month, great. If he comes out and struggles a little bit, that isn't going to be a death sentence. It just can't be, nor would Alex. I think Alex has proven that he's not going to judge a tenure of this kind of player based on 4 weeks of data. It's just not going to happen. But fans will. You know how this works, Sean. If he has a bad 2 weeks, people are going to be furious, and it's going to be what it is. But I do think, like, we've seen creativity. That's the word you use. That's a good one. I'm almost projecting them to come to a different deal with him this winter in my brain right now. Obviously, that's silly because the default is Kim decides yes or no on a player option, and that is the default. But given where the Braves have been, where they've operated, like, it should surprise absolutely no one if they come up for air in November or December, October or November, whatever the player option deadline is, and basically it's a 2-year deal for $24 million total, like something like that, or it's a 3-year deal for whatever if he's healthy and they feel good. Like, there is some wiggle room there, but no matter what, if you're Ha-Seong Kim on the player side, which I always like to point out the player side, you're guaranteed $16 million next year. So you're not going to suddenly take some bargain basement discount contract. Like, you have a guaranteed amount coming to you, and if it's a restructuring, it might lower the AAV a little bit, but it's going to be a commitment, because like that's the whole point of having the player option, negotiating that last winter with Tampa Bay.
And I was talking just a second ago on the player side, the Braves investing in Kim wanting to make the most of his year and him potentially being able to do that to help the Braves contend. It should not be lost on anyone how the Braves can benefit Kim as well. Number one, they're keeping him at shortstop, which is going to make the most of his value. Number two, they're looking to contend, which is going, if he plays well, it's going to add value to him naturally itself instead of him playing for someone who's not looking to contend. And the big thing also, the Braves' history with helping players who in past years have been productive, had been played very well. They fell off a bit due to injury or lack of production, where they weren't a good fit wherever. But when they came to Atlanta, they did well. Look at what Jorge Soler did in 2021. Donaldson, Ozuna, look at how they bounced back in their careers. Just last year, Ramon Laureano really benefited from his time in Atlanta. The Braves have a history of taking these type of players and being able to make the most of them, helping get back to where they were at their best in the past. So that's something else that really could stand out. And Kim's approach at the plate seems to really fit well with kind of what Tim Hires has put in place in the second half of this season. But the other thing that I do want to also mention about Kim, we talk about the streakiness of players so much. We're so high, so low with many of our players. Kim just stays solid. And that's in the Braves core of that. So I agree with you on the side of the Braves want to invest in that type of presence in their lineup. It would not surprise me if all Kim was open to it. He would take a 2-year deal. I would hesitate, though, on one thing. I do think that the Braves will look to renegotiate, but I do think that they put some type of option out there, maybe to where, not a player option. I don't really know how they could do it. But if I'm Kim, I'm not necessarily that interested in going like beyond maybe 2 years, because I do. He probably wants to make the most of if he does well in 2026. So that's another factor in how those negotiations will go.
Oh, for sure. And I always try to bring up the player side because I know everybody's a fan of the team and rooting for the team, and I get all that. But like the player side matters. They have to buy, especially when you have a player. This is a unique thing for the Braves. They don't do this. This is why it's this is something we don't talk about a lot. But the player has they earned that. They negotiated that. That was their pillow insurance contract coming out of the injury last winter. Obviously, Tampa Bay didn't work out super well, or they wouldn't have placed them on waivers. But they're in a weird spot too as an organization. I get all that, and the Braves benefit potentially. And look, just to say this out loud, there's some downside. We mentioned risk. When you owe a player option of $16 million, if he is either hurt or not playing well, that's not great. So this is, I'm sure that Alex, when he talks about this, and he will, I'm sure, because it's such a big commitment that he has to talk about it at some point soon, he'll acknowledge that. I mean, this is a deal that has, I keep saying deal. It's not a new deal. They're just picking up a deal that already existed. So they're deciding it's a decision that has some risk to it. But also, I don't know where you come down. I guess we should end with this, Shawn. It seems like you like this. It seems, I don't want to speak for you, but I will ask the question, like, broadly speaking, you don't have to give it a grade, but like, how do you feel about this right now? With acknowledging we don't have all the information yet, and the injury stuff is lingering, but if he's ready to play now and you're taking a kind of it's not a free shot, it's with some risk, but what's kind of your synopsis of this whole thing?
I was getting into the show with this, but I think this is a good time to kind of sum it up this way, in my opinion. Since May of 2024, when our offense started struggling, we ran into injuries with Acuna. Just a lot of things have not worked out our way. Or when it comes to us expecting something, like the trade deadline, for instance, it wound up happening worse than what we expected. This is a different scenario. This is adding to 2025 to set up for 2026 and beyond. This is a type of move that is making things better moving forward. You combine adding Ha-Seong Kim, Jake Fraley to the mix for 2026. You look at what Hurston Waldrop is doing during his breakout, Drake Baldwin continuing what he's doing, Joey Wentz potentially becoming a depth option. Those type of developments, this depth getting better for the Braves when you know we're going to have to utilize it due to injuries or underperformance likely next year at some point. Our setup for 2026 in terms of depth and in terms of addressing areas that we clearly needed to improve on to have a better chance of contending in 2026, the Braves approach has been better than expected over the past 4 weeks, and I commend Alex and the franchise for doing that. That's why I'm excited about this move. We are in a better spot to contend in 2026 than we were when we were very, very inactive at the trade deadline. I didn't expect to say that. I'm glad that we are.
Yeah, I would echo that for sure. And there's more that we'll talk about with this. This is just our emergency first reaction. But also, I like the aggression.
Yes.
It's weird to say aggression when all you had to do was just click the box to say claim on waivers, but it's a real commitment to owe that much money. When you look at free agents, and we've all kind of alluded to this a few times without doing a deep dive during the season. When you look at the shortstop crop almost every year, it's really hard to add shortstops. And if you can do it without having to give up anything else but money and not have to trade for it, and not a superstar level player, but a good starting level shortstop when he's been healthy. Like, I like the aggression of go ahead and you know what, let's just do this now. And it's funny, people, I don't know if I'm opening Twitter every once in a while to make sure I'm not missing anything that's new that's being said as we're talking. But one of the things that I've gotten in my mentions is like, way to take all of the suspense out of the offseason, Alex, and kind of in a funny way. But yeah, I mean, one of our major storylines this winter was going to be shortstop, and this isn't necessarily full on solve it, but this is what their bullet they're firing on shortstop. This is what this is. It has to be that. I mean, there is room for nuance, but as far as like questions about what the plan is at shortstop, the answer to that at this moment on September 1st is Ha-Seong Kim in Penn. Like, that's what it has to be.
Absolutely. And the other thing that and you mentioned you like the aggression. I do as well, especially when the fact that some of our riskier moves here recently have not worked out well. Jared Kelenic, after all the different hoops that we tried to jump through to get him, he has not worked out well. Jerickson Profar, he seems to be a pretty good investment, but he certainly, has not been productive towards us winning this year like many had hoped. But the Braves are staying aggressive. And also, to your point, I think it's a great point. This time, though, you lack suspense. You don't have to jump through all those hoops. It's straightforward. You don't have to give up prospects. When you talk about, I know many people want as exciting an offseason as possible, and the uncertainty or not knowing what occurs adds to the excitement. The Braves don't need excitement for their offseason. They need productive moves with as less issues as possible, and this is the type of move that checks those boxes. Yes, you do have the injury risk, but I think that there are plenty of options out there for the Braves to use to make him the best that he can be if he's on the field, and that's why I think the reward is worth it. So I'm here for the lack of suspense, yet getting a player who could really play a big role for us winning in 2026.
Yeah, I think that's where we can leave it, but it's aggressive. It is not without risk. We've acknowledged that. We understand it. We both like it, but with the prism of there's downside too. And that's, most deals have risk if we're being 100% honest about it. But this is one that might, I have been saying, and I have to back this up with what I'm saying now, been saying for 2 months now, like, you can't sit on your hands anymore. This is not a run it back winter if I'm in charge of the Braves. And this is not a run it back move. This is an aggressive move. So more to talk about, Shawn, I'm sure. I know our guy Steven is busy today, and we'll have to get his thoughts on this. Scott is gallivanting. He just texted me from across the pond weighing in. I will not share that. We'll talk about it when he gets back too. But a big move, and hey, some programming for us in September. Maybe not in October and November anymore, but some programming for us in September that was not expected at this point.
For anybody also who is maybe not necessarily that excited because it takes some suspense out of the off season, here's one little nugget to remember. When we went into the trade deadline, we were kind of disappointed that Ozuna was not moved. Iglesias was not moved. But then a few days later, don't forget, there was that news breaking, or that revelation that the Braves talked with the Twins about Byron Buxton. It did not work out, which makes sense. Now you've got shortstop potentially addressed for next year, maybe potentially beyond. That means Alex can turn his attention to improving the squad in other ways, in other creative, unexpected ways. So now that shortstop's taken care of, you've got his attention to potentially improve the team in a way that none of us expected. The chances of that happening now, I think, have improved. So that is something to be excited for when it comes to the offseason.
It's going to be fun. It'll be a little bit different. And again, more to come on this podcast. So if you're just finding us for the first time, welcome aboard. We talk about the Braves all year round on this show. Follow Shawn, follow me, follow our colleagues Steven and Scott, who are not with us today, but subscribe to the podcast. Shawn, I appreciate the rare opportunity to do a show with you. We are split up because we basically de facto are the hosts of the two. That's just what happens. But we'll do more of these together. This was fun.
Hey, I am glad that I got to sit here and do it with the legendary Brad Rowland. That's what I'm most excited about. Brad,
that's not
pleasure getting to do it with you.
Thank you, Shawn. And hopefully it was a little bit, maybe, I don't know if easier is the right word. You didn't have to people are gonna be disappointed with it. They don't hear the welcome at the top of the podcast. And they know, then your voice will appear. People will know, oh, Shawn is here. That's great. Anyway, please subscribe, everybody, to Hammer Territory. Once again, tell your friends about the podcast. We'll have more to come, I promise you, later on this week. And we'll see you all next time.